Off the wagon. I ain't taking any animal of mine through here. A rough voice came through my dreams, but didn't quite register. There was a light approaching in my dream, something beautiful. A star, maybe? I set off. Pain started in my shoulder, and my stomach dropped as I hit empty space. I barely had time to register my dizziness before my fall. I briefly saw the hanging lantern spinning in a rush before I crashed to the damp ground below, taking a face full of grass and soil. I pulled myself up, spitting out dirt and trying to ascertain my whereabouts. Water was splashing in the distance. Were we finally there? You're on your own. The driver didn't even look at me as he climbed back up on the wagon, barely giving a thought as he started off and left last words trailing back to me. If your brother was here, he's probably dead. You do have my condolences. Stop thinking about it. I couldn't let myself believe him dead. He had signed up without hesitation, leaving me back home with the choice to stay or follow. I felt a twinge of pain in my ankle where it had been broken, keeping me home and apart from him. We had been a team since I could remember, storytellers from the beginning. I was brought back to the present by a howl coming from the nearby forest. The small port lay ahead, lanterns burning low, barely illuminating the encroaching darkness as their reflection played off the dark river ahead, making eyes in murky water that followed me as I walked. I could see a glow coming off Tibby, dim against the dense forest of the island. Whether he was here or not, that would be my last stop on this journey. I started walking after grabbing my belongings off the ground, though it wasn't much other than some dried beef and a canteen in my bag, alongside the small Bowie knife he had given me 3 Christmases ago, still shining bright as the day it met my hands. I gripped the cold leather on the hilt as the small tavern overlooking the port neared, hesitating as the hand under my long coat gripped the knife hilt while I pushed the door open. Sound hit me in waves as the smell of beer and tobacco hit me harder, overpowering my senses and almost knocking me over like the breakers crashing below. My grip loosened as I moved, stepping into the tavern's warm embrace. The smell of roasting meat and baking bread overpowered the alcohol, finally, and I relaxed my hand on the dagger. There was a friendly-looking girl standing at a nearby counter, filling a glass from a massive bottle of dark liquor.
Be right with you, sweetheart.
She shouted to me, taking the glass over to a table where one man sat alone. He gave her a nod and smile as she walked back to me. First thing I noticed was the blue army coat he wore, buttons fraying off. The second thing I noticed was the massive scar running down his face, only separated by the eye patch covering what I assume was his now vacated socket. The barmaid was in front of me suddenly, flashing a bright smile and giving me a warmer welcome.
Alrighty, darling. You looking for food, booze, a room, or the whole deal?
I snapped back, trying to pretend I wasn't staring intently at the man. The scaler around us made a decent enough cover as I took a seat at the bar. She couldn't be older than 15 and looked to be running this place herself. Don't know how she managed, but she was standing at attention with a hand ready on a spatula behind her, waiting for something on the stove to finish. Drink, please. Cider, if you have it. I said, though she didn't catch me at first. I tried yelling it louder when she finally understood me, moving back with a fresh glass from the nearby shelf to a cask at the far end. A soft pink-orange liquid poured into the glass and foamed up. Peach cider. Hadn't had that in a long time. Not since meeting him here in the city, all those years ago. Lost myself again for a moment before she handed me the cider, looking expectantly at me for any other questions. I need to get over to the island. Do you know if a boat is running in the morning? I shouted across at her again. I saw her face pale, bearing the shade of a new moon. It looked like one of those ghosts in the stories he would tell me.
Hell, sir, ain't nobody wanted to go to the island in years. Not since Sherman, at least.
A general hush fell over the nearby patrons when she said that, bringing them to glare at whoever had said the name before realizing it was the girl supplying them booze, overriding their cares about the union with love of alcohol.
Chambers takes people on occasion, but he usually ends up coming back alone. There's still bodies out there that just couldn't be brought back. My papa's probably one of them. That's what Mama says, at least.
He pointed toward the scarred man in the back, wearing the blue colors that seemed to be so prominent around these parts. I didn't see many back home displaying their blues out in the open, even back home in the swamps. Hell, nobody wore their grays when we were back in Boston just a few years ago. This guy was either a hero or an absolute bastard, and I wasn't ready to find out. She spoke, even though I already knew what she was going to say.
He might be willing to help you.
I nodded to her in thanks before taking my cider, walking over to the man as he trained his eye on me. I had seen the waters down past Florida once when I was young, where the water was the bluest thing on earth I'd ever seen. That's what was in the man's eye as I waded into its unknown depths. He swore under his breath as I approached. Damn it, Millie. What? He asked in a voice like the shale outside was scraping his throat. I saw a beard growing gray under his sunken blue eyes now, teeth missing and nose awkwardly cut short at the tip. 2 cavalry sabers sat on the seat next to him, uninviting anyone nearby. I took a gulp of my cider before sitting across from him. I need your help. I started out before he waved a hand and cut me off. He took a sip of his liquor, not showing any sign of tasting the pungent alcohol even I could smell coming off of it across the table. You want on Tibby? Go fuck yourself. He started, still training his eye on me before going in again. I've stopped taking you assholes there to survey the land. You never pay up front then you fucking die before you can pay me. The government can either bring in some actual troops to figure shit out over there, or just do what Sherman should have and finish his damn march. He finally left off, taking a deep breath before chugging more of his drink in a quick gulp. I'm not looking for anything like that. I need to know if someone was there. I started in before seeing his face change from anger to pity. Shit. He sat back in his chair, raising a hand and rubbing his scruffed hair back. He stroked his beard and looked at me, sizing me up. I looked back at him, never moving my gaze from his eye. My condolences. Who was it, if I might ask? It was my turn to hesitate, wondering what I should tell him based on the coat over his shoulders. He must have noticed my apprehension, because he patted the coat fondly before dropping it down his back, letting the tattered grays show under it. I ain't a traitor to the Union, if that's what you're wondering. He gave a half-hearted laugh as I eased back a bit in my seat. No, I picked this off a particularly nasty bastard I had a grudge with, and one cone ain't keeping me warm nowadays. I'd stand up so you could see where I took my grudge, but we all bleed red in the end. Someone in the war, I take it. I know it's a lot to ask. I hadn't expected such a level of observation, nothing I could have ever imagined in this barnacle-soaked coast outside of Savannah. I had to steady myself, preparing to tell him the truth. I'm looking for a soldier. I bit my tongue, almost rather than say it. Is a Negro, sir. He fought for Sherman. The last message I got from him was that he was stationed on the island until things were settled. He never came back after. Even he was one of Sherman's, he's a brother of mine. I was part of the march too. He took another drink, throwing his head back and draining the glass. Fucking ceasefire was barely a week old when the stores fell. I know he's probably not alive. I've heard the stories about the island. I started mouthing off whatever I could to tell him I knew the risk. I had to go. I made a promise, even just borrowing a boat. His face softened as he looked at me. I tried to concentrate my gaze on the cider but couldn't stop tears from dropping in, making ripples as the cider fizzed. There was a boulder sitting right beside my tongue and threatening to let loose a landslide if any pebble of a word slid through. I was there. He offered up, looking me in the eyes. He nodded as if to reinforce the point. I know what you're going to find, but I owe the dead there some respect. If that means bringing peace to one of their friends, that's a start. He stood now, hoisting the 2 sabers off the other chair and tightening their belt around his waist. He looked at me expectantly, still sitting with my cider and looking at him. I couldn't believe he had agreed so easily to take me, much less that he had empathy for my plight. If he was out there, he was smiling at me when I entered that tavern. I didn't get your name, sir. I choked out, at least hoping I could thank the man who would be helping me. He simply smiled, crooked and good-toothed, back. Call me Chambers. He held out a hand to shake, which I accepted before realizing he was missing the ring finger on it. He laughed as he shook my hand, noting my surprise. Alan. I said back to him, still choking back words while trying to hide behind my cider. He finished tightening the belt, picking up a blunderbuss alongside it. He looked at me as I stood, sizing me up. You bring a weapon with you, Alan? He asked, flinging the blunderbuss over his shoulder. I noticed a pouch of gunpowder and some silver beads in his belt, opposite the sabers. He was prepared for something that I wasn't. I simply brought my hand up from my coat, revealing the shining Bowie knife. He gave a hearty laugh. That won't get you very far. If you know how to use this, I'll give it to you. I shook my head. He motioned me after, leaving money on the bar for the young lady working, who shouted a thank you to him from across the room. He waved back as the door swung closed behind us. Now, he and I stood alone in the pale lamplight from the single, lonely flame above the tavern door. He pulled a canister from his pocket, striking a match on the tavern wall and lighting the wick he had just produced. I gasped, light shining in a bright circle from the canister, casting a beam to show our way. As Chambers adjusted a nozzle attached to it, the light grew brighter, better lighting the greenery and surrounding coastline. I don't think I've ever seen anything this bright since the sun went out. Chambers laughed at me like a father watching his child discover something new. He pivoted quickly, waving a hand at me to follow him down the narrow steps toward the docks. So you've heard about the island? Yes, the rough cobblestone trying to twist my ankles as we went. My hands were shaking as the docks began to shine below us, a few lonely lanterns keeping the darkness from the bay. I heard one landed there. I replied, remembering the horror stories I had heard from those that went through the fall. Some said they fell where blood was shed, others said it was God's judgment. I know the places where they fell got overrun with something before long. Something ain't the half of it. Chambers chuckled back. He had oddly grim humor about going to the island. I could see the glow brighter now, though not enough to determine color. We finally reached a small boat on the docks, a smaller sailboat with a few oars attached to the sides. Chambers went up to the small lampposts at either end of the boat, lighting them from his torch and bathing the docks in bright light from the flames now burning high in the night. He adjusted knobs again, bringing the flames down slightly while moving small mirrors around them, adjusting their lights in different directions. Most of the bastards are afraid of light, so they'll leave us alone as we cross. Come on now. He climbed into the boat after I did, wavering a little as the water rocked us. It had been years since I'd been on any kind of water, but it came back naturally after a moment. He settled in and hoisted the sail above us, lighting the lantern atop its mast. Chambers settled in on the aft with the till while I took a spot near the mid, looking back at him as he met my eyes with his single one. The deep blue caught me again, even in the dim light as his face hardened in the flickering lantern's glow. Star's done a lot around here since it fell. You're going to see a lot that ain't natural. He picked up a small pistol from a cabinet on the boat's side. Assuming one of them gets you and doesn't kill you right away, I'll deliver one shot from this directly to your skull. No hesitation. I'm saving you from something worse than death. What exactly are they? I couldn't comprehend what would be a worse fate than death, other than the horror stories of the war and how some lived injured on the battlefield for days. I had tried to stray around any of the Starfell areas on the maps I had, and typically had safe passage all the way here, but I hadn't come across anything the other travelers spoke of. Dunno. Chambers grunted, guiding them along in the water, leaving the docks behind as the wind caught the sails. No, I used to have some friends when I was younger and frontierin', natives, warned me about some of their old legends, and I'd rather have those than what's on this island. I shivered, the cold wind blowing through the humid air brushing long, unkempt hair from my face as we crossed the gap from the mainland. Something breached the water nearby, letting out a small wail as the light illuminated it briefly before disappearing back to the depths. Paying no mind, we're almost there. Now, if you look in that compartment on your right, you're gonna find an old axe. I want you to hang on to that while we're in here. That thing got me off the island in the first place. He glided us smoothly along the water, the island approaching ever closer in the dark. Now the glow of the island was brighter, a color somewhere between that deep blue ocean that grew in our garden back home. Now, you gotta tell me some things before we get in. I nodded. What are we looking for? What was his name? He looked at me, setting that same blue eye that managed to stare into my soul better than any two ever had. And are you prepared to see what he might be now? I'll help you look, and I will do my damnedest to protect you, but we will go no further than the crater's edge. Yes. I gulped, stealing my resolve as we coasted toward the shoreline, water splashing around as something peeked out at us from the waves. He was lighter-skinned, said his mama was a slave and daddy was, well, you know. He kept his hair short, though. I imagine it's grown out plenty since he's been gone all these years. Hazel eyes, like a pecan that ain't quite ripe yet. I stalled, stopping before I was too far into the small details. The little things I could recognize immediately upon seeing him. The little, beautiful details. He was missing half of his left pinky finger. Happened in a milling accident when he was a kid. I kept going, not noticing the change in Chambers' face. His face, the right side of his face is scarred, pretty terribly. He told me it was because he tried to take a whipping for his mother and his dad just went at him wherever he could get. He has them all down his arms and legs too. They're darker than the rest of his skin, so he looks like he's got a net or something on all the time. He can't grow a full beard because of it either, so he has lines running through it where the scars are. Looked pretty comical when he was first growing it, but now I'm sure it's all over. Ezekiel. Chambers muttered, snatching me back from my memories with the sound of his name. Do you know where he is? I was immediately back to the present, adrenaline pumping with the most hope I'd felt in months. Please tell me you do. Shit. Chambers sat back against the boat as they began scraping onto the beach. Shit, kid. Shit. I'm sorry, I can't let you go in there. We're turning around. My chest seized, breath refusing to move into my lungs. I couldn't control it when it suddenly broke out in heavy, short bursts as I tried desperately to breathe. Despite everything he had already told me, despite the now rapidly spiraling screams in my head telling me otherwise, I still needed to know if he was alive. What happened to him? God damn it all. Chambers sighed as he stopped trying to steer the boat, allowing it to simply rest on the shore. Ezekiel was one of my privates. He was a lieutenant under General Sherman, in charge of the regiment with him in it. I was with him when the damn stars fell. We barely made it out in time, or we would probably have been killed when it hit the fort. Left a damn big crater in the ground. Things didn't change immediately, you know. Sure, his sun disappeared in the blink of an eye, but at least we didn't get them right away. The creatures? I asked, still unsure of what to say to him. He was desperately waiting for an answer to my first question, but he wanted to avoid it. Did they kill him? I wish they had. Chambers said back, giving me a solemn look of pity as tears welled in my eyes. At least then I could give you a straight answer. Should have gotten them out of there after the damn thing fell. They wanted us to stay and make sure nothing happened around it. Guess it was natural to be suspicious after Lincoln was killed, but god damn it, this wasn't the time. The damn star cracked about a day after it landed. Cursed things came pouring out of it. Not like anything I ever seen, like it sprung a damn leak and was spraying out everywhere. I don't know how we missed it. With that thing, whatever was coming out of that thing, I've seen cannonballs hit people, and it weren't that bad. I gulped. He looked at the tree line up the beach briefly as a shriek rang through the night, coming from further into the island overgrowth. About then was when we noticed a smell that quickly overpowered every other sense I felt. Death, 100-fold. I had smelled the rotting carcasses of farm animals most of my life, discovered a few that had died before sitting in the hot Georgia summer for a few hours. And that would be like the finest lavender compared to this. It didn't faze him, still telling me of the horrors. I didn't see Ezekiel being hit, but the ones that were became something else when whatever it was went back to the star. Then it just started glowing, and the soldiers started turning into damn nightmares all around. We got out of the fort, escaped the worst of them, and was able to kill a few smaller ones with that there axe. He pointed to the one I was holding now, giving a small smile when he looked at it. That thing cut quite a few down. Ezekiel was pretty handy with a sword too. Took down as many as I did. Chambers grew quiet again, focusing his eye on mine once more, not wavering for a moment. Running through the woods, it was worse than any hell I heard preached about. Them boys, the one that got hit, they just lost most of their color, started getting these little wisps to them like it wasn't smoke, not burning, but steam coming off of them. Even if they were barely held together after the hit, they started twisting and stretching every which way after that. I saw some have their bones splintered through, some just tore, but their faces kept smiling, not a care in the world. Happy as a pig in shit, smiling teeth and all. That's what stays with me. That's what Ezekiel held off when we got to the beach. I let out a shaky breath, gulping back the pain welling behind my tongue and piercing deep down into my chest. So, you held them off while you were in? I tried to grab him, kid, I really did. He just kept pushing more people in front of him onto the boat, and when there wasn't room, well, he stood right there, planted his blade in the sand, picked up a damn repeating carbine that someone dropped on the beach, and started going at it. We might have been dead if it hadn't been for some fucking miracle of timing. They were loading up excess ammo from the fort, so there was a whole damn barrel of tubes the Spencers used. I saw Ezekiel reload the damn thing 12 times before they even got past the trees. He picked up his sword and just started going at him. Never seen a man use a rifle with one hand and a sword in the other, but goddamn, he was a fighter. The lights receded too much, and last I saw was one grabbed him. He stopped here, locking his eye with mine again. I don't know if he died, but they took him. I've been on this island a few times since, cleaning up bodies and scavenging, but I ain't seen no sign of him. Not a corpse, nor one of them bastards. So you don't know that he's dead? I asked, feeling a small pang of hope. I grabbed onto it, holding tight and not letting go no matter how hard it clawed to get away. He just sighed as he stood up, bringing the sails down and opening a small compartment along his seat. Pulling out a small canister he tossed to me, along with a matchbook. I looked in the flickering lanterns at the matchbook, looking at him in surprise. Thought you couldn't get white phosphorus anymore, it had some bad health effects. Son, I'm more concerned about keeping my insides in me, alright? No, you see where that twists at the bottom? This is a replacement. He tossed me another, smaller canister, about half the size of the one I already had. Screw that in when that one runs out. You keep that lit at all times, hear me? Axe out too. I didn't see him die, and I figured out enough with you by now to know you ain't gonna leave until you know. I stood up quickly, eager and hoping to find him hiding somewhere out there in the dense brush. I struck one of the matches quickly after ripping it from the book, lighting the small wick on the canister he gave me. The match was bright as is, but whatever was in the canister burned brighter than the sun right in my hand. I almost dropped it in the bottom of the boat out of surprise as he reached back in and took it from me, propping the small casing around it up to focus the beam ahead of us. He handed it back to me as I got out of the boat, leading the way up to the tree line as waves crashed behind us. I'm gonna ask you one more time, but I already know what you're gonna say. Are you sure you want to go in here? I could only nod as Chambers nodded back to me, situating his lantern canister in a small pocket on his chest before drawing his cavalry swords, one in each hand. Stay right with me, and do not stray. We're going to try the star. If they dragged him back, That's where he'll be. I followed him into the dense forest, nettles and branches whipping at me from every direction with even the slightest movement. Chambers hacked away at some, but not many gave way to his swings, rather bouncing back before coming back on me. How do you know he'll be at the star? They all go to the star. He grunted. His bright light was illuminating the way in front of us. The lights from the boat had long disappeared through the trees. I could hear something off to my left cackle, shrill and breaking like an obnoxious drunk. It quickly turned from a cackle into a scream as it rushed closer. Shine your damn light around us, keep them off. I did as he commanded immediately, fearing for my life as I swung my light in the direction of the noise. I briefly caught a glimpse of pale, stretched skin unfolding from a slender body before its mouth opened wide and sharp teeth let loose a screech. I could barely comprehend what it was I saw before swinging my axe, missing. It leapt upwards off into the higher branches and away from exposure. My heart caught in my chest as I began wildly flashing my light all around us, gripping the axe tighter. What the hell was that? A damn judgment from God if I ever seen one. Chambers replied, leading me into a small clearing in the forest area and pulling the canister from his belt, sliding back the shade and letting the light bathe our surroundings. A calamity of hisses and shrieks and screams of anger and pain poured forth from every direction around the clearing, branches rustling as terrors retreated from the light's burn. I could barely tell now, but there was a low glow through the trees, coming from a ways on from us, maybe another 5 minutes walk. I'm gonna ask you again. Are you sure? Because you seen what's out here, and I can promise if he's one of them, you don't want to see that. He could be one of those? I felt like I was going to throw up thinking about that now. Picturing him over that pasty, white-eyed thing that had briefly been seen in my light, I had to steel myself again, catching sight of something else staring at us through the tree line. This one was on all fours, crouching behind a fallen tree I think it stared at us. The eyes were just slits, almost like the middle of a snake's eye, but glowing purple. It licked its lips when it noticed that I had picked up on it, smiling a mouth with only 4 sharp teeth before curling fingers in a wave. I shivered, almost losing my nerve again before nodding to Chambers. I need this. He loved you. Chambers said to me, looking toward the pale light. I looked in surprise, taken aback at what he said while terrified he had figured it out. He just looked back at me. I can tell you Ezekiel mentioned you a few times in passing. While we would all talk about what we had back home some nights, he would tell us about you. I felt my heart drop, and shaking more now in the bright light than they had when I was sitting in the dark with whatever creatures were looking at me. He told you? Son, a love that strong ain't something I'll shame you for. We could all be so lucky. He said, picking up the lantern again and setting the shade back to guide us again, as I adjusted mine to give me more feeling of safety. I was still shaking, but that was the best thing I could have heard. At least I knew he wouldn't leave me here on the island. Unless he broke through my thoughts again. Black, white, man, woman, it don't matter. Shit, we had more love and the good Lord might not have rained the heavens down. You'll think it was a god that did this? I asked, moving forward along with him through the underbrush and trees, the glow growing brighter with each step, even overtaking his lamp's bright white light. I don't know if I ever believed in him before all this. If it weren't God, that scares me more. Chambers replied as we came upon another small clearing, the fallen star in the center now visible to me in full glory. The star was nearly taller than the trees around it, giving off the same glow I could first see from the water of purples and blues mixing and almost breathing from the star. It didn't come out in beams like regular light, but more like steam from it, floating in luminescent wisps through the air as the light dispersed, turning from the deeper hues to lighter as they ascended before covering the surroundings. It was beautiful, a celestial body right here a mere stone's throw away. I didn't notice the things around it at first, almost invisible as I could see straight through them, their ethereal shapes outlined as the glow pulsed over them. It's, I whispered, still gazing at the star open-mouthed as the comprehension of the beings hadn't hit me just yet. It's like something from a dream, a damn nightmare, Chambers replied, pulling a small scope from his pocket and holding it to his eye, singling out the ones who gathered all around the star, worshipping at its altar as it breathed there. He continued looking as I gazed on, transfixed at the layers of cracks that had spread through the star intricately, almost fearfully carved in the surface of the celestial body as it breathed the faint light in and out. As I tore my eyes away from it and looked to the surrounding beings, I noticed the faces and remembered Chambers' warning. I knew that smile from anywhere, a gap between his two front teeth that always caused a small whistle when he talked while overexcited. His eyes and skin were the same translucent as all the others, almost like he was an old ghost from a story he told me one night. Chambers must have noticed him at the same time. Oh, shit. He let out a sigh of resignation, putting the scope away and redrawing one of his swords. Kid, I'm not letting you throw your life away. I know you've lost a lot, but I promise he's not Ezekiel anymore. Let's make it back to the boat and I'll buy you some drinks at the tavern. You can tell me how he was before the war. I felt him bump my shoulder but didn't notice, still transfixed on Ezekiel's smiling face bathed in the star's glow. He was so joyful, just like I remembered him from before he left to fight, before he left and became this thing. I saw that same smile as he told me stories, me writing them down on paper so we could take them to the presser nearby and share the adventures we created together. He, the jovial creator, me, the enraptured recorder. I had to see that smile up close again. I turned to Chambers, handing him back the axe and canister he had given me as he tried to turn me back to the trees, back to safety. I'm sorry. I can't. I know he's gone. There's no point if I go back without him. I was crying as I said it, Chambers relaxing his grip and letting me take the 10 steps forward toward my beloved who was taken from me before I could ever say goodbye. He smiled at me as I got close. I looked back to Chambers, nodding. He sighed and waved goodbye solemnly, making his way back into the trees, fleeing the accursed island and its inhabitants, soon to be once more. The purple-eyed creature leapt at him from a nearby tree as he walked away, but he turned in time to slice it clean through. He kept walking, adjusting light as he left. Ezekiel was still smiling as he came to me, iridescent hand taking mine with warmth and embrace just as I remembered. I smiled at him as he led me to the star, all the way up to a small opening almost at eye level. He smiled back at me before guiding my head to the opening in the star, to gaze inside at what was causing this magnificence. I felt excited now, with the prospect of being with Ezekiel once more alongside the beauty of the star that had me enraptured. I gladly looked into the small opening, gasping as vast fields of stars and sun stretched bright dandelions of light for an eternity before me. All time seemed to stop and my smile wouldn't fade. Nothing would. I pulled my head back to the open air of night, meeting Ezekiel's smiling eyes with mine. As I embraced him and he did the same for me, I felt the infinite stars from within suddenly burst forth into my conscious. The most intense feeling I had ever experienced as every emotion overcame my body before being overcome by nothing but intense warmth, love. Ezekiel is here. I am Ezekiel. Ezekiel is me. We no longer had use for a name in the great field of stars. Twin nebulas burning bright in each other's glow forever now, with no worry as to who may see in the infinite sea of the cosmos, far away from their life before, but never more at home with each other. Wow. my voice is slightly shot from doing Chambers' voice there, but I thought that was an absolutely beautiful story. I did a lot of retakes for lines in this one because I really wanted to get this right. I was like engulfed in the story within like the first couple paragraphs, and I really wanted this to be an experience for everyone. Before I go on, I do want to say that this is a short story from a collection of shorts from the author. The name of the short story compilation is May Fallen Stars Guide Us Home, as is the title of this story. So that link is in the description if you would love to, or if you would like to support the author. The link, again, in the description. I probably had a picture of what it looks like on the screen at some point. Thank you so much to the author for letting me read this. That was an absolutely beautiful story. I really liked it. And I thought Chambers was a great character. I really liked voicing him and doing all those lines there. That was absolutely incredible. And I really hope that you all enjoyed that story. I definitely did. Thank you so much for listening. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, please. All of that. And I will speak to you in the next one. Much love. Ego. Volt. Anima. Vestra.